So the Son doesn't will himself into existence or will himself as an object in the way uh, that a subject would will. A subject wills like something distinct about himself. Um, we would rather say like something along the lines of the Son wills the same thing the Father and the Spirit will, um, in reference to the assumption of a human nature and a hypostatic union.
Uh,
So do you kind of get what I'm saying?
yeah, so the response that you gave was that you will reject premise 7 because you don't accept the claim that the incarnation requires the act of the will of the Son to be reflexive. And the line of reasons that you provided, which was because the premise itself assumes that the object of the Son willing is going to be the Son, whereas the
Mhm.
Son doesn't will himself into existence, nor does he will the humanity to come into existence as an object. So, just to clarify, when premise 7, as the next upcoming premise, or this premise itself, is going to be an analysis of the incarnation claim, meaning that's going to be proven through your metaphysical framework along with the theologians within your own church. For example, we have Mastris, we have Thomas Aquinas, we have Scotus, we have many different people. So I'll just provide some codes and I'll justify the premise itself because I think this is going
Mhm.
to be a blunder from your side because when the Son wills for the humanity, the very terminus in which the action is exhausted in is going to be reflexive towards the person of the Son himself. So let's just go over this quote from Summa Theologica, third part, question 3, on the mode of union on the part of the person assuming, and Article 4. So let's see what he says. Henceforth has to do with this action in assumption is
And
common
you
to the three
posted
persons.
a oh, you
Yeah,
posted.
it's
Okay,
in the
sorry.
side chat.
I got
Yeah,
you.
so when it comes to the action itself, when the person's will for the action is going to be common to the all divine persons. But then Thomas Aquinas clarifies, but what pertains to the nature of term belongs to the one person in such manner as not to belong to another, for the three persons cause the human nature to be united to the one person of the Son. So the Son does will for the humanity, and the Father does will for the humanity. The Holy Spirit likewise wills for the humanity. And now, when it comes to the reflexive part, this is justified within the scholastic traditions because the scholastics, for example, Scotus already goes beyond that and it explains the very action in which the humanity is exalted in. So he talks about how the product of humanity assumes a specific type of relation. So I'll send a quote in a side chat. So this is
Mhm.
in his Ordinatio 3 on question 1, whether it was possible for human nature to be united to the Word in the unity of supposit on section 71. This is what he says. The first is clear, thus the Word assumes that S takes to himself. So if the action itself is going to be directed towards the person of the Son, which he says takes to himself, then by definition, in accordance to the premise that you agreed with, which was premise, what was it? Premise 2, if the subject itself is going to be what was it? If the terminus itself will stand in relation to the subject itself, then by definition it's going to be reflexive. So premise, the very premise that you negated, which was premise 7, has to be granted, or otherwise you'd be denying the very entire analysis or the very conceptual analysis of the incarnation claim, and you wouldn't be accounting for the classical understanding of the incarnation claim that was affirmed by the apostolic churches.
Okay. Um, so really quickly, in reference to Aquinas, because we'll go to Aquinas and then what Scotus says as well. So for in reference to Aquinas says, just to clarify what you're trying to argue, would it be correct to say that you're trying to argue that since the Son is the term of the assumption, um, the Son's will or his willing must be reflexive, and the Father and Spirit in the same way must be asymmetrical? Well, not in the same way, but like their willing is asymmetrical. Is that what you're trying to argue?
Yes, the very instance of the Son is willing is going to be reflexive because he wills for
Okay.
himself to become a man, whereas the Father wills for the Son to become a
Okay.
man. And given the premise 1, you would count two different actions, but
Yeah.
within the incarnation, we count one product of the humanity. So
Mhm.
that's another contradiction
Yeah.
that you have.
Yeah. Hold on. So yes, I understand that. So that's what you're arguing. But Aquinas doesn't actually even agree with you here. He distinguishes act from term. So
Yes, I know.
yeah, so he makes this distinguishment between the act of assumption and the term of assumption. He says, like, he's talking about the act of assumption as common to the three persons, but he's saying the term of the assumption belongs specifically to the Son. But what you're trying to say basically is moving from, like, the Son is the term of the assumption. And your argument is the son's act of willing is reflexive. That doesn't follow.
Well, just a clarifying for you, when it comes to when it comes to an action, so given the premise one that you agreed with, the action
Mhm.
itself would have like a specified relation that we ascribe to it. For example, I gave the two examples within the premise, premise two and
Can
premise
you
three,
pause
which
for a second? Give
was
me 1 second. Can you pause?
okay.
Hold on, someone's talking to me.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Nah, see, dude.
Sorry, continue.
Well, you're
Like,
saying
just
that you're
continue from
here.
where like, from kinda like the point you were making. Because my point was uh, that in reference to Thomas Aquinas's quote, you're kind of the assumption that the son's act of willing is reflexive, it doesn't follow from what Aquinas is saying, which is that the son is the term of the assumption. So, um,
Well, I
what's
can
your
justify the premise itself because given like the first part of the argument that you agreed with, which was well, you said that you
Mhm.
grant the rest of the argument, then you grant the premise six of the argument. You said premise seven when it comes to the analysis of the incarnation, you don't grant that. Well,
Yeah,
in that claim, you're saying, well, the difference is going to be that all of the persons will for the same action, but the aspect of the terminus itself or the aspect of the term itself is going to be the area in which it's going to be different for the individual subsistences in the Trinity. But that's not going to follow given the first part of the argument that you've granted. Because when it
which
comes
part?
to the
The
first
entire
five
thing?
premises that the first five premises that you granted, the prerequisite of the argument or the rest of
Mhm.
the argument. Because if you granted that part, then the justification that I can just provide is that, well, the terminus itself is gonna be like constitutive of the same actions. Because would agree that with the claim that the actions themselves are gonna have some sort of identity. And because the terminus is gonna be part of the identity condition, meaning that the action itself is gonna have a metaphysical makeup, so the terminus itself is gonna be part of that constitutive condition, and therefore you cannot argue from that perspective saying, well, in terms of the determinants, there's different relational structures, but in terms of the action, there's not really relational structures. It doesn't follow, and that doesn't even critique or refute the weight of the argument that I provided, because it
Yeah.
will still be part of the constitutive identity conditions of the action itself. So I
Yeah,
still
so
don't see a critique.
I understand, like I understand where you're going, and, like, by the way, thank you for actually having a somewhat of a philosophical discussion, but, like, I understand that, and correct me if I'm wrong, your point is that determinants can be constitutive of an act's identity. I'm not denying that. That's not what I'm saying. My disagreement specifically is about what the terminus of the act of willing actually is. So, like, I feel like what's happening is you're trying to treat the personal subject in reference to this argument, who receives the assumed nature or, the human nature in this case, as the terminus of the son's willing. But I don't think that necessarily follows because the terminus of the divine willing is the incarnation, the assumption of a human nature into union with the word, not the son as an object distinct from the act. And so, because of this, the fact that the incarnation terminates in the son does not mean the act of willing terminates in the son in the reflective sense. You're basically, I feel like you're moving from the terminus of the effect to the terminus of the intentional act. So even if we agree that acts are individuated by their relational structure, you still have to establish that the son's act of willing has a different relational structure.
Well, you said so you're just providing the argument in terms of the terminus and the aspect of the terminus itself. But just to clarify, you do agree with me that the terminus itself is not going to be externally imposed upon the divine will itself.
Is that a question?
Do you agree with that? Yeah, yeah, do you agree with that?
Oh, sorry. Ask the question again.
Do you agree that the terminus of the action itself is not going to be externally imposed upon the divine will?
Yes.
Well, because it's not going to be externally imposed upon the divine will, given that it's going to be internally specified by the same divine will that's going to be, what was it, possessed by the different individual substances, and given there's going to be an intentional content itself, therefore the premise itself has been already granted. You
No,
just
wait.
granted me the premise.
So no, because I feel like you're not understanding what I'm saying. So let me ask you a clarifying question. Uh, are you saying that the terminus of an act of willing is always identical to the final subject who receives the effect? Or
Mm, Well, it depends on the type of relation that
yeah,
we suppose. For example, if the action itself is going to be reflexive, then the terminus itself would be,
okay.
from your perspective, in terms of
Sorry,
the
give me one more
incarnation,
second.
it would be
Sorry,
identical.
someone's coming up. Yeah, what's up?
Okay. Do you want me to repeat?
There's someone's talking to me right now.
Okay.
Oh. Well,
Yo, Zane, you're gonna say server muted because you're trolling. So no one unmute Zane until the entire discussion ends.
Um, so I gotta hop off in a second, but can you? I don't want to like just like run off. So, can you give me like your last, like your main point, and I want to contend with it because I want to actually engage with it.
I'll just respond to the question that you asked me. You said
Yeah.
that would the terminus itself be identical? Well, the entire thing, well, it depends like on the type of relation that the action itself assumes. For
Okay.
instance, as Maximus the Constantinople talks about it, if the action itself were to be reflexive, which in this case, when it comes to the product of the humanity, the action itself is said to be reflexive because the humanity, or at least the product of the humanity, is going to be now a new metaphysical makeup of the person of the Son. And that's why he says, I'll send a quote in the side chat. Where is it? Yeah, here. This is where
Mhm.
he says that with regard to this person, there's no distinction in Christ in soul in any kind whatsoever, for as a person of the Logos is identical with his own flesh. So this justifies is justified given the earlier premises they agreed with, and
Okay.
despite the action itself being, what was it? Uh well, because your entire contention, I think you're just saying, well, the action itself is still gonna be numerically one, given that we have one action, but in terms of the terminus aspect, we have the Son, who is going to be the very subject of that terminus. Therefore, the argument isn't really providing anything, which you already agreed with me that, what was it? The terminus itself is going to be part of the metaphysical makeup of the action itself, and it's not going to be external imposed upon that action, but rather it's going to be internal specified within the will's intentional content itself. So you already agree with the premise itself. But just like maybe some sort of
Mhm.
semantical issues that we're having here.
Yeah, just reading through because I was just kind of reading through what you just posted in the side chat from Saint Maximus the Confessor. I feel like this is just like supporting kind of what I'm saying. Like it, so it says that the logos is identical with his flesh, according to the hypostasis. Not it doesn't, but it doesn't say that the logos's act of willing is identical to a reflexive act directed
Not,
towards himself.
I'm not referring to the act of willing. I'm referring to the action itself because I said the entire question is going to be contextually dependent, or the response is going to be contextually
Mhm.
dependent. I said it depends on the type of relation that the action is assumed in. I said if it's
Mhm.
going to be a reflexive one, then the terminus would be identical. And this is what he agrees with. And he says, well, the logos is identical with the flesh, and the flesh is going to be the product of the humanity, or more likely, or more precise, is going to be the terminus of the humanity, or the terminus of that action itself. So he does agree with me there.
Where does it say terminus in the quote?
The crisis humanity is the terminus, or the flesh is going to be the terminus of the action.
Okay. So yeah, the I feel like we're just kind of like going past each other because my point is like I can agree that like once again that the terminus can be a constitutive of an act's identity. It's not what the disagreement is. Okay, so the disagreement is once I said this before, but I'll say it again, is about terminus, what the act of willing is, like what that is. Um, and so in reference to the quote, my point is about personal identity. So the one person of the logos is the same person who exists with a human nature, as we know, qua hypostatic union. But personal identity doesn't mean that every relation involving the person is reflexive. So just because there's a relation involving a person doesn't make that relation therefore reflexive. Um,
Okay.
but either way, I do have to head out. I do have a family member who wants to talk to me for a little bit.
Wait, just before you
So
leave, I just got a
yeah,
clarifying question.
yeah, just yeah,
So,
clarifying question.
yeah, so when it comes to the literatures, as we know, we have three conditions that we go over when it comes to the act of willing, which are the three essential components that we have. Are you aware of the three essential components or no?
Of active willing.
Yeah.
Um, maybe not by name, but like if you explain them, that I could probably reference them by like what they are in principle.
Well, it's very simplified. The first one is the subject, meaning that the one who wills. Then we have the second one, which is going to be the intentional content,
Yeah,
meaning
and then
what is being
determinus is the
willed.
last one.
The terminus is the last one, meaning the object or the subject toward which the willing is going to be terminated in. So none of these are going to be accidental. None of these are going to be imposed upon the condition, the essential components, but rather they're going to constitute the very identity conditions of the action itself. So saying the terminus is going to be different is not really going to be a sufficient response, given that's going to be internally constituted within the essential components themselves or the identity conditions.
Yeah, but my dispute is that I don't think that we're identifying the terminus correctly. Like that's been my whole point this time. We're not identifying what the terminus is in this instance.
I say is the product of the humanity.
Yeah, and I think that that's wrong. And so like are you saying the hold on. Give me a second. I really want to continue, but like this. You do gotta head out. Um, if you want to DM me like the formal argument and then DM me the rest of what you said, like in reference to the, because I know it's kind of hard to track and write down the whole conversation, but if you just want to like DM me kind of your points with the support for the premises, I'll
Yeah.
also respond with that as well.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no issue.
stuff like that. But yeah, that was I love the conversation. Good discussion.
Yeah, good discussion, brother.
Yeah, thank you for having.
You're welcome.